So let's talk about something that's, well, it's pretty heavy. Active shooter incidents.
Right. And just hearing that phrase, it forces a really harsh moment of clarity, doesn't it?
It does. It's a terrifying scenario. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something we all hope we never, ever have to face.
But hope, as they say, is not a strategy.
And that feeling of helplessness these incidents create,
Mm.
it's corrosive. It's
Yeah.
so real. But helplessness is absolutely not the only option available to you.
That's exactly right. And that really brings us to the core philosophy for this whole deep dive. Train the mind, win the fight.
So for this session, we're really trying to turn that fear, that uncertainty, into empowerment, all through knowledge and preparation.
We've synthesized a stack of essential sources you shared, guides, research, expert analysis, really to give you a shortcut to actionable, proven strategies for these worst-case scenarios.
And today, we're really focusing on two things. First, we have to understand exactly how the threat landscape is changing. What is the data telling us right now up to 2024?
And then, crucially, we pivot to actionable, systematic strategies for survival. And a huge portion of what we'll discuss comes from the tactical wisdom of Mickey Meadow and Gray Matter Ops.
Specifically, their avoid, deny, defend framework.
Yes, that framework is such a critical piece of the puzzle.
But we're also pulling in the latest FBI data, expert analysis from groups like the Rockefeller Institute, and essential insights on awareness from people like Cade Courtley.
So you're getting a deep, multi-perspective approach. We're distilling the best information out there into practical knowledge that you can use right now.
Our mission is to move you from feeling exposed to feeling proactively prepared.
Okay, sounds like exactly what we need. So let's dive into the data first. What's the current threat picture look like? How is it evolving?
The data paints a very clear, if worrying, picture of escalation. If you look at the recent FBI report, the one covering up through 2024, the 5-year average, so that's 2020 through 2024, is sitting at around 44 to 45 active shooter incidents per year.
Which in itself is just a staggering number.
It is. But the trend beneath that average is the really concerning part.
That's the kick in the data, right?
It's the kick in the data. That FBI analysis shows a huge jump, a 70% increase in incidents in the last 5 years compared to the 5 years before that.
70%.
70. We are talking about a major escalation in the frequency of these attacks.
Wow. That statistic alone tells you we just can't afford to be complacent. It also highlights that these are no longer, isolated outliers. They're a systemic challenge.
Absolutely. And just a quick, interesting factoid from the analysis. Saturdays tend to see the most incidents.
So if the frequency is going up, where are these incidents actually happening? Are they clustered in specific high-risk areas?
That's a good question. And when we look at the location data, we see a shift that really informs our need for constant situational awareness.
Okay.
In the 2024 data, open spaces, so parks, streets, public areas, that was the most frequent category, made up almost 50% of incidents.
50%. And then commerce and education settings followed behind that.
They followed closely behind. And if you look at that longer 5-year FBI window, 2020 to 2024, open space still leads slightly at about 41%, with commerce right on its heels at 39%.
So it tells you that there really is no single safe area.
No single
True?
safe area,
Yeah.
right. But if we pull back and look at analysis from groups like the Rockefeller Institute, who track these things over the very long haul,
Just the 60s, right?
since the 1960s, their data consistently highlights workplaces and schools as frequent long-term locations.
Workplaces and schools. Places where we're required to be every single day.
Right. And these are the types of locations that Cade Courtley calls soft targets.
Let's define that for everyone listening. When we talk about a soft target, what are the tactical implications?
It's basically any place where a lot of people gather, but where security is easily penetrated or not obviously hardened.
So think malls, supermarkets.
Exactly. Malls, supermarkets, big open plan offices, schools, houses of worship. They're accessible, they often have multiple entry and exit points, and they just lack the robust security you'd find at, say, a government building.
So the implication is they're chosen because they offer high victim volume and low initial resistance.
Which means we, the civilians, are often the first line of defense just because we're there.
Exactly. Which just underlines why personal preparedness, that state of mind, is so critical in daily life.
Let's shift the focus from the location to the attacker. Is there a consistent profile we can look out for?
The sources, especially the FBI, are very, very clear on this.
Mm-hmm.
There is no single predictable profile. Anyone who tells you there is selling a simple answer to a very complex problem.
But gray matter ops does point to some common mindsets they observe.
That's a really useful distinction. What kind of mindsets are we talking about?
Often they are deliberate, focused, and disturbingly detached from the consequences of their actions.
And tragically, suicide is a massive factor. Over half of these incidents end with the attacker taking their own life.
Right. And that deliberate, final approach contributes to their high level of focus during the attack itself.
Does the FBI's emphasis on observable warning signs connect here? If there's no profile, the focus has to be on behaviors.
It absolutely does. The FBI stresses that these acts of targeted violence almost always involve planning, and planning leaves a trail. So we should focus on observable warning signs, not demographic profiles.
Okay, now the FBI is careful about the role of mental illness.
Very careful. It's present in about 25% of offenders, which is, roughly similar to the general population.
So it's not a direct causative link, it's not the sole driver.
Precisely. The focus has to be on concerning behaviors. We're looking for things like making specific threats or comments about violent plans.
Or obsessively fantasizing about violence, showing unusual difficulty coping with stressors.
Maybe becoming increasingly isolated with angry outbursts.
And there's one behavior that's particularly actionable for location security, which is testing the environment.
Yes. Looking for things like an obsessive interest in previous attackers, or, and this is critical, asking questions about security, testing doors, observing security rotations at a location.
Or just a noticeable, hardened viewpoint that's linked to some violent cause.
The crucial takeaway here is that recognizing and reporting these specific behaviors, not just speculating on who might be dangerous, that gives us the only chance for intervention and disruption before the plan is executed.
Right. It's moving from just reacting to potential prevention. And if prevention fails, that focus shifts immediately back to the person themselves. So how do we build that internal baseline of preparedness?
That leads us directly into situational awareness, which is the absolute foundation of all personal survival strategies.
Gray matter ops stresses that preparedness starts before anything happens. Cade Courtley calls it a state of mind.
It's not about being paranoid. It's about being proactively aware of your surroundings, wherever you go.
And Courtley gives us such a simple, practical framework for this, the situational awareness checklist.
Right. When you enter any public space, you should be asking yourself 4 questions really fast.
First, find your exits. Where are the 2 closest ways out, even if they aren't the main door?
Second, locate cover. What could actually stop a bullet, not just hide you?
Third, observe suspicious individuals or objects. Does anyone or anything seem fundamentally out of place?
And fourth, and this is huge, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, pay attention to that signal.
Just making that a quick mental habit, a 2-second scan every time you walk into a room.
It gives you a baseline. It means if something terrible does happen, you're not starting from absolute zero, which is where that freeze response kicks in.
Yeah.
You've already got options in your head.
You mentioned locating cover. This is where we need to really nail down the distinction between cover and concealment.
Yes, because under stress, people confuse them, and that confusion can be fatal.
It's a hugely important distinction. So cover is something that physically stops incoming projectiles, like bullets.
And concealment just hides you. It breaks the line of sight.
Exactly. Think thick concrete walls, a large brick pillar, the engine block of a car, maybe a large sand-filled planter. That is cover.
Concealment is things like drywall, which is almost all interior office walls, cubicle partitions, clothing racks, or wooden doors. These things will hide you, but they will not stop a rifle round.
So if I'm in a modern office building or a supermarket, I can't rely on a stack of canned goods or a standard interior wall to save my life.
That's right. That drywalled office cubicle offers near zero protection. When you're doing that quick mental scan, you're specifically looking for substantial structures that offer genuine cover, not just a place to hide.
Knowing your exits and knowing potential cover, that's the groundwork that saves critical seconds.
Which brings us directly to the action itself, the core survival strategy. Avoid, deny, defend.
This framework from Gray Matter Ops is so clear, it's hierarchical, and it's action-oriented. It's not about just hiding and hoping.
So let's break down that hierarchy, starting at the top. Avoid, that's the non-negotiable first priority.
If you can get out, you get out. Avoid is decisive escape with intent. You have to remove yourself from the immediate danger, what they call the X.
And I want to emphasize that language because it's a tactical instruction. Escape is survival. The goal is not just running away aimlessly.
Right. The goal is to create distance and dispersion.
That is the critical upgrade to the old idea of just running. You're moving away from the sounds of the threat muzzle flashes, gunfire using whatever cover you identified on your way to an exit. You have to get off the X.
And if escape is possible, you escape fully. Don't just run to the nearest bathroom and barricade. If you can keep moving toward the outside, you do it.
That emphasis on dispersion is so key. Dispersion forces the attacker, the predator, in this scenario to choose.
Which slows their decision cycle and breaks their momentum. If the target area is suddenly empty and the victims are scattered, they have to actively hunt, which is time-consuming and risks their exposure.
Exactly. The attacker relies on proximity and clustered targets. Distance and dispersion deny all of that. If you can escape, don't start moving until you are completely clear of the battle space.
But if you're trapped and you cannot escape, you move down the hierarchy to deny.
Deny the attacker access to you and your location. This is the contingency plan, not the first choice. If a void is blocked, you barricade.
What does a solid barricade entail?
Locking the doors first. Then piling a heavy, immovable furniture against it. You're trying to make entry as slow, noisy, and difficult as possible.
Turn off the lights. And crucially, silence your phone completely. No ringer, no vibrate.
Then find a secure, genuinely concealed hiding place in that room, ideally behind cover, and stay silent.
You're creating a hard target, buying time, and forcing them to move on to a softer, easier target.
Precisely. And if that denial fails, if the attacker gets into your space, or if you're confronted directly, you move to the absolute last resort. Defend.
The guidance here has to be aggressive and committed.
It is. This is about survival. The materials from Gray Matter Ops are explicit. You take aggressive, committed action to incapacitate the attacker and stop the threat.
You do not fight fairly. This is about using extreme violence to save your life.
Use whatever is available as an improvised weapon.
Absolutely. Chairs, fire extinguishers, sharp objects, belts, anything you can grab. And if you're with others, you coordinate to overwhelm the attacker with sheer aggression and numbers.
The goal is decisive action to stop the threat immediately.
And it's empowering to remember that civilian action really does make a difference.
It does. That 2022 FBI data showed that in over 11% of incidents, civilians, often unarmed ones, intervened and stopped the shooter.
That's an enormous statistic.
It really is. It reinforces the message from organizations like the Alert Center. What you do matters. Your actions count.
But acting effectively, aggressively, and decisively under that kind of extreme, life-threatening stress, that requires training the mind before the stress hits.
Right back to our core theme.
100%. This is where the psychological aspect becomes the most important weapon you have. The first thing to understand is that the lizard brain, our primal emotional brain, it takes over under stress.
It doesn't use logic, it uses a limited menu. Fight, flight, or freeze.
And stress impairment is real. It causes tunnel vision, where you only focus on the threat. It causes auditory exclusion, where you don't hear critical sounds.
And it causes a complete loss of fine motor skills. I mean, fumbling with a lock or a phone becomes almost impossible.
The psychological process often starts with denial, just refusing to believe it's happening, then deliberation, where the rational brain tries to catch up.
That deliberation phase is where people freeze. They miss the decisive moment to act.
So how do we pre-program the brain to bypass that freeze response and act decisively?
The key is giving your instincts a better script. Willpower is limited and it gets depleted so quickly under stress, but several specific trainable tools can override the panic.
We know physical fitness helps regulate your body's physiological stress response. And crucially, taking any action reduces that paralyzing feeling of helplessness.
Don't wait. Do something.
And a simple, immediate tool is combat breathing.
It's extremely effective because it forces you to regulate your autonomic nervous system. It's a simple, specific pattern. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 3.
Hold for 2, breathe out through your mouth for 3, pause for 2.
In 3, hold 2, out 3, pause 2. That simple pattern forces slower, deeper breaths, which rapidly lowers your heart rate and short-circuits the panic response.
It gives your rational, decision-making brain a chance to get back online.
What about mental preparation, those mental scripts?
That's pre-planning, also known as the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's a framework for making fast decisions under pressure.
By running what-if scenarios beforehand. If I hear a gunshot at the coffee shop, where's my exit? What's my cover? You're creating cognitive pathways.
So if you hear a loud, unexpected bang, your brain has to first observe the environment, then you orient, is that a balloon pop or a gunshot?
If you orient as a gunshot, you decide avoid is the priority, my exit is left. then you act.
By having this loop pre-programmed, you dramatically reduce the time you spend in panic and deliberation.
So rehearsing the OODA loop means when the stress hits, you're reacting with training, not just pure instinct.
Exactly. You're turning observation into immediate action. And there is one powerful psychological shift that the sources recommend for extreme situations.
And that's the conscious shift from paralyzing fear to mobilizing anger.
How does someone consciously execute that emotional shift when the lizard brain is just screaming danger?
It's an active refocusing of energy. Fear causes you to shrink inward and freeze. Anger, focused outward at the injustice of the threat, is an energy that mobilizes you.
You consciously decide, I am not going to be a victim to this injustice, and you channel that energy into decisive, aggressive action. It gives purpose to the physical response.
It all boils down to preparing your mind when you're calm so that you have better trained responses available when everything is chaos.
That's the essence of survival resilience.
Okay, let's talk about the next phase. You've avoided, denied, or defended. Law enforcement is arriving. This is another critical moment that is often confusing and dangerous for survivors.
It is absolutely vital information. The training materials are crystal clear. Law enforcement's #1 job when they arrive is to stop the killing. That is their singular focus.
Meaning they will move past injured people, they will move past civilians hiding to neutralize the threat first.
Medical aid is secondary to stopping the threat. Precisely. They go straight for the sound of the gunfire. When you see officers, you must expect chaos and understand they view everyone as a potential unknown threat initially.
So your job is to comply instantly and make it obvious you are not the threat.
And the hands are the most important part of that compliance.
Unequivocal. Keep your hands empty and clearly visible at all times. No phones, no pointing, nothing in your hands. Raise them slowly if instructed. If you're told to get down instantly.
Do not hesitate.
What if the listener is legally carrying a weapon and maybe even used it to defend themselves?
The advice is absolute. Put the weapon down immediately, keep your hands visible, and do not approach the officers with it. Your safety depends entirely on instantly complying.
Is there a specific verbal identification that's recommended to reduce confusion?
Yes. Sources like the Alert Center suggest yelling clearly and repeatedly, unarmed civilian friendly. Use that phrase to cut through the chaos and make your status known.
That's vital information. And lastly, what about medical readiness during that chaos?
This brings us back to the delay. Since EMS and paramedics often cannot enter until the scene is declared secure.
The initial medical aid for severe bleeding, which is the most immediate life threat, has to come from the survivors themselves.
So we need to be our own first responders. That's where training in basic bleeding control, like stop the bleed, comes in.
Exactly. Learning how to apply direct pressure, how to pack a wound, and how to correctly apply a tourniquet is incredibly important.
Having a small, accessible trauma kit, even if it's just gloves and a tourniquet, could save your life or the life of someone nearby while you wait for professional help.
We've covered a huge, essential amount of ground here today, from understanding the alarming trends in soft target locations to the absolute necessity of situational awareness.
And applying that core survival strategy. Avoid, deny, defend, based on the tactical work of gray matter ops.
Then, maybe most critically, digging into the psychological side, training the mind to overcome stress, using techniques like combat breathing, running OD loops.
And the conscious shift from fear to mobilizing anger.
Plus, knowing how to interact safely with law enforcement when they arrive, and understanding the urgency of basic medical readiness like stop the bleed.
It's a lot to process, but the consistent message from all these diverse sources is empowering. What you do matters. Building resilience starts with preparation, not panic.
Knowledge isn't just abstract power. When you understand these frameworks and you commit to applying them, that knowledge becomes a potent survival tool.
This deep dive is really just a starting point. Where can people go to continue this training and deepen their knowledge?
I highly recommend checking out the Gray Matter Ops website for more approach details and formal certified training. Additionally, the Alert Center at Texas State University is fantastic.
They offer online civilian response to active shooter events or STRASH training.
And for the listener who want to take that step today, what's the best way to find those online resources?
The specific URL for their training is easy to remember, elearning.alert.org. That's elearning.alert2.org. You can start that training right now.
Excellent resources. So our challenge to you, the listener, is this. What is one small step you can take today after hearing this? Perhaps locating the 2 closest exits in the next public place you enter.
That's a perfect, actionable closing thought.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this has been valuable, insightful, and ultimately empowering for you. Stay safe, stay prepared, and always remember that core philosophy guiding us here.
Train the mind, win the fight.